To America, Texans are hoping for some relief from the worst wildfires in the state's history. The Smokehouse Creek fire, which started less than 2 weeks ago, is the second biggest in the history of the United States. It's so far burned nearly 500,000 hectares and killed 2 people. The impact on the cattle industry in the Texas Panhandle, which is home to more than 85% of the state's 4 million cattle, has been devastating. Thousands of animals have died. It'll take the industry years to rebuild. Grace Hussain is a journalist with Sentient News. That's a non-profit news organisation reporting on food and farming, and she's been covering the wildfires.
One of the most devastating impacts has been that it has claimed the lives of at least 2 people. But then turning to the other impacts of these fires, it's been 1 million acres. They started in the Panhandle of Texas and then have spread over to Oklahoma. And then the firsthand accounts and the images that we're seeing coming out of the devastation that it's wrought, we're seeing burned buildings, burned out cars, families digging through rubble, trying to find their wedding ring they weren't able to grab before they fled. And then one of the most devastating impacts as well has been the death of thousands of cattle and horses and others that have been severely burned. So will need to be put down to ease their suffering as well.
At its worst, how quickly was it spreading?
At its worst, it was spreading several miles an hour. Thanks to the high winds, it was spreading very quickly. Thankfully, those winds have dropped now, so we're able to get it a little bit more under control. Texas had a very wet winter and then it thawed early, which led to a lot of grass growing, and then followed by a hot spring combined with windy conditions. It killed off that grass, made it the perfect tinder and kindling for the spread of fires. We're seeing a proliferation of not just fires, but these mega fires, which have become 1,000% more common in the last 40 years. And also the lengthening of Texas's fire season. Once it would have only been a few months long, but now we're seeing these fires happening earlier as well as later in the year than they would have historically. I based my research for this article, a direct role in this fire is cattle ranching and this animal agriculture, which is something that we often overlook as a cause contributing to climate change.
Break that down. Specifically, what are you alluding to?
Cattle ranching has been linked to the proliferation and the spread of non-native grasses. So specifically, we're thinking cheatgrass, which burns very easily and has become a real problem for a lot of ranchers in the American West because it does allow for these fires to burn very hot and to spread very quickly, and it also grows very quickly. And where cattle are grazing, we do see, based on research, that there does tend to be more cheatgrass growing. And then just speaking for cattle ranching as a whole, cattle ranching produce massive amounts of methane. We're talking about millions of tons a year as an industry. And that methane actually has an 80% higher warming potential over a 20-year period than carbon. So we're really seeing this as an industry that is pushing forward climate change, but that is not getting the attention that it needs to in order to be addressed.
The article that you've written that you refer to, you do acknowledge in that article that not everybody would subscribe to that point of view. You point to the fact that in the minds of some, cattle grazing can stop the spread of fires by creating fuel breaks. Those are cleared areas of brush where fires lack fuel. How much is that viewpoint prevalent just now?
So that viewpoint is fairly prevalent, especially among industry folk, because the cattle industry is a multi-million-dollar industry. And it has been true in the past that fuel breaks created by cattle have helped stop the spread of smaller fires. However, when you're getting these massive mega fires coupled with these very windy conditions, relying on fuel break is not a viable solution as the fires are able to just blow right past the created fuel breaks.
Clearly, the first priority for those who've been horribly affected by this is to try and enable farms and ranches to recover. But beyond that, how do you say the industry needs to change?
Pasture management has been proposed as a solution for helping to address some of these issues. However, ultimately, pasture management is just going to be a band-aid solution. So I don't view moving cattle on a certain timeline or only allowing them to graze in a certain area as a viable solution. What we do need are inventive solutions, such as those that have been already put into action in chicken farming, where we have farmers transitioning from raising chickens to instead raising mushrooms or less intensive, primarily plant based crops. And then we also have programs that we could expand that have been run by nonprofits that are seeking to encourage farmers to rewild land, which is basically instead of raising cattle, they would be dedicating that land to a nature preserve and bringing back some of the native species of grasses and plants and animals that we need in order to address some of the issues we see as far as water quality and even droughts that are all connected to the loss of our native species.
Grace Hussain, journalist with Sentient.